You're a fine American, sir. Ms. Abrams, can you hear me? I don't know where to look. I hate these Zoom hearings.
Yes, sir.
In terms of voter confidence in our electoral system and perception of voter integrity and and election, let me start over. I'm sorry. In terms of the confidence that Americans have in their electoral system, do you think we're better off having an election day or an election month?
I think we are better off having a process that allows every single American the opportunity to participate in elections. And given that the initial notion of an election day was based on an agrarian economy that no longer exists for millions of Americans, and given the fact that we have a number of Americans who are limited in their access because in states like Georgia, there is no paid time off for voting, I think we have to make every opportunity to make voting accessible to every American. There is no other entity that
let me
would
stop
be
you
denied.
because I've got a bunch of questions for you before you get off the subject and get me off. So you're okay with us not knowing, say, weeks or months after an election who the winner is?
Yes.
Okay.
We have had times in this country where we have not known.
Talking about the Georgia bill, help me understand. And I'm not interested in a 30,000-foot view. That's not meant to be a criticism. I'm speaking to myself, I guess. I'm not interested in platitudes. Tell me, you're against the Georgia bill, I gather. Is that right?
I'm against certain provisions of it, yes.
Okay, and I think you've called it a racist bill. Am I right?
I think there are provisions of it that are racist, yes.
Okay. Tell me specifically, just give me a list of the provisions that you object to.
I object to the provisions that remove access to the right to vote, that shorten the federal runoff period from 9 weeks to 4 weeks, that restrict the time that a voter can request and return an absentee ballot application, that eliminate
slow down for me because our audio is not real good here.
Certainly.
Could you start over for me?
Certainly.
Thank you, ma'am.
It shortens the federal runoff period from 9 weeks to 4 weeks.
Okay.
It restricts the time a voter can request and return an absentee ballot application.
Right.
It requires that a voter have a photo identification or some other form of identification that they're willing to surrender in order to participate in absentee ballot process.
If I can stop you, that's where they're going to not comparing signatures, but to voter ID?
Yes, sir. And as Ms. Eiffel has pointed out, we would become only the 4th state in the nation to require voters to put at risk their identity.
What else? What else?
It eliminates over 300 hours of Dropbox availability.
Okay, what else?
It bans nearly all out-of-precinct votes.
Bans what? I'm sorry?
It bans nearly all out-of-precinct votes.
Okay.
Meaning that if you get to a precinct and you are in line for 4 hours and you get to the end of the line and you are not there between 5 and 7 p.m.,
okay,
you
what
have
else?
to start all over again.
Is that everything?
No, it is not. No, sir. It restricts the hours of operation because it now, under the guise of setting a standardized timeline, it makes it optional for counties that may be may not want to see expanded access to the right to vote. They can now limit their hours. Instead of those hours being from 7 to 7, they're now from 9 to 5, which may have an effect on voters who cannot vote during business hours during early voting. It limits the voting hours.
I get the idea. I get the idea.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. Let me approach this another way. If a state decides to require a voter to prove who the voter says he is or she is, do you consider that racist?
Not at all, sir. Voter identification has been a part of the American theory of democracy almost from the beginning.
You're okay with it?
I support voter identification, yes.
Okay. How about ballot harvesting? And I heard earlier you were talking about letting the tribal elders collect ballot. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where the the parties, and believe me, both parties will do it and probably are doing it, pay operatives to go out and help people with their ballots and collect their ballots. Are you okay with that, or are you against that?
I don't think it's an either or situation. I think it depends on what the conditions are, what the rules are, but making it easier for those who want to participate in elections to do so with safely and securely, I think it's
So
worthy
you're
of
okay
consideration.
with ballot harvesting?
No, sir, I did not say that. I said, because that is a term of art that encompasses a wide range of behaviors. And even
Well,
your example.
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to get down from the platitudes and understand what you're for and against.
But sir, what I'm for is.
Help me with this. Let's suppose that the Republican Party wanted to hire people to go out and knock on doors of voters and say, have you voted yet with your mail ballot? And they say no, and then the operatives are told to contact the voter and say, let me help you with your ballot. If you have any questions, I can even suggest who you might want to vote for. And after you vote, I'll collect the ballot for you and you make it easy. Is that okay?
Sir, I'm both an attorney and a former legislator, and it is not simply the words that you're saying.
I'm an attorney and a current legislator, and I might trade places with you, but keep going.
And so my point is, as you and I both know, that the context, the rules, and the structure matters. Now, in the very narrow circumstance that you just described, if there are no controls and if it turns into buying votes, of course I object to that.
Okay.
But if you look at the piecemeal components that you're describing, and if we are talking about how do we make it easier for voters to participate in elections, I'm not certain what that looks like, but what you described in this very specific and narrow construct, it sounds like you're in violation of a number of different rules, not the least of which is buying a vote.
All right, let me ask you one last question. Our chairman's really indulged me here. Do you think it was a smart thing for President Biden to do when he called everybody who supported the Georgia bill a racist?
I think that this bill is grounded in racial animus. I think that the language that we are using to describe.
Can I ask you how you know that, madam? I mean, it's an honest question. How do you know that?
Because for 15 years, the Republican Party of Georgia not only sanctioned but celebrated its vote by mail provisions. It was only after voters of color for the first time in 15 years successfully used those provisions in favor of the party that they disproportionately support that those rules changed. It is that for years, for more than nearly 2 decades, we had early voting hours that supported voters that were perfectly fine. It was only after communities of color used those provisions in
But why doesn't that hurt black people and white people and brown people? This is what
I think it hurts everyone. If you watched me, I have fought for the right to vote for every person. No one is entitled to victory.
But that's a long way from the president calling people a racist because they support a state.
Sir, I'm responding to the question you asked me. My point is that when your motivation is grounded in the race of those who are engaging in behaviors that you disagree with, that is racist, particularly when it is targeted at communities of color by people in power.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that. The chairman's have gavelled me. I just need to ask, how do you know that's what they meant?
Because we asked them not to do it because we showed them what the effect was, and they refused to answer, and they refused to abide. I worked with these people for 11 years. I don't believe that every single person who supported this bill has deep racial animus in their hearts for all purposes, but for the purposes of voting rights, when racial animus is your predicate, then yes, you should be held accountable and those bills should be stopped.
Thank you. I'm sorry I went over.